Metaphysics is the study of reality. The three big concepts is the reality, appearance reality distinction, cosmology, and ontology. We're studying Western philosophy, and we're going to go into the process of looking at some of the theories of the Western philosophers. But all metaphysics deals with these concepts. They're just that from a different culture, different language. They may use different words, but they're always concerned about what's on the outside and what's on the inside. These concepts, their meaning is derived from studying all of these theories. So we've already took out the essence of these theories and looked at them, and they are useful today. So right now, we're going to look at the world ontologically, based on what the philosophers believe by the fundamental substance. We classify the philosophy as a monist, pluralist, or dualist. And we want to focus right now on some of the monists, right? So monism is the view, ontologically speaking, monism is the view that there is one fundamental substance, one thing that differentiates to become a horse, that same thing becomes a planet, become a sun, and become an ant, right? Monism is that view there's one fundamental substance that is the source of everything. This idea begins with the philosopher named Thales, who's also recognized as the first philosopher within the Western tradition. This designation was given to him by Aristotle. So studying Aristotle, Aristotle studying Thales recognized that Thales and all these philosophers here were actually doing science. They were all natural philosophers. They were doing what you call science today. They were trying to study nature using logic, using the logos, trying to understand nature without appealing to any mystical ideas, any divine theories, but trying to explain the world logically. This is what science does, and these people were doing. And so they were all basically the beginning of science in the Western tradition as well. These Thales should be seen technically as your first scientist. But they're all engaging in that. So Thales gets a student named Anaximander, okay, and he advances Thales' ideas and comes out with his own view of metaphysics, of ultimate reality. And then Anaximander acquires a student named Anaximenes, who also advances Anaximander's ideas and Thales' ideas. These three philosophers are seen to begin as the starting point of what you call philosophy today. Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. They're called the first school of philosophy. These philosophers together, we're gonna look at these three philosophers together. Just a snapshot of what they held to be true, right? These philosophers argued that and from their observation, they observed that the world was going in cycle, the coming and going of the day, then the procession of the stars over the seasons, the coming and going of the seasons, the summer, the weather, the winter, the fall. They observed all of these, right? And so they gradually came to the idea that all things were cycling, okay? And when you look at life itself, they saw the cycle of life. And that's what's in front of you right now. The natural kind emerged from the natural elements. As your human body is solid, it has the earth element, it's moist, it has the water element, you breathe, it has the air element, and the heat of the warmth, the heat of the body is the fire element. And when you die, you decompose back to natural elements. According to Aristotle, Thales was just doing regular scientific analyses, but then he began to wonder, look, if we have millions and millions of natural kinds coming from these natural elements and everything come in cycle, four gives rise to millions and millions, why do we believe that the four doesn't go back to something simpler, okay? If everything comes in cycle, it must reduce to something else. There's something underneath the four. Now he's going beyond his sense experiences. He's looking at things ontologically. And he doesn't have a way to experience what's underneath it all. That's where theorizing comes in. This is the idea of monism. He's the first philosopher because he gave the intellectual of his time the idea of monism, a belief that there's one thing down there, there's one source. We don't know what it is. But the basic question at this time that's being asked is, what is the stuff things are made of? What is the stuff things are made of? Thales does an analysis. And from his analysis, he lives in Greek Ionia, Milesia, which is Turkey today, a Mediterranean seacoast. Because of where he lived, Aristotle argued that Thales came to the conclusion of what the stuff is because of where he lived in, all right? Because Thales concluded the fundamental substance was water, Maybe not mind shaking to us right now, but this was an intellectual argument. According to Aristotle, he would have known that since you're on an island, peninsula there, if you dug deep under the ground, you'd eventually come to water. So he may have thought that water gave rise to the earth. When you, during the summer and the sea heats up, a lot of heat goes up. He may have thought that heat goes up and becomes the fire, the light in the sky. Simple argument was there. Or even when you boil water, you see it's bubbling out. So you think that the water is producing air. This simple argument, the thing is, he's arguing. He's not just saying just believe it, he's giving you argument. Why is it important? Because the argument is bad and things like that. You can argue against the argument. This is the beginning of the philosophical journey. I want you to, a philosopher says, I want you to believe in this. And you say, okay, go ahead, convince me. You're looking for an argument. Because if you have the thing in front of you, everyone can see the fact. That's cool too. I can see the fact too. But when you say, let's go beyond the fact, that's when it becomes an intellectual journey, right? So Thales gave us our first substance. He called it water. He's a monist. He said there's one thing there, is that one thing gives rise to everything else. But there is a problem with Thales' theory. Anaximander, his student, sees that, okay? And what is that problem? Well, Thales doesn't distinguish between water of experience and water that's fundamental. See, there's a distinction between the fundamental water and the earth, fundamental water and the air, fundamental and the fire. And logically, you can't even see how water and fire connect, okay? There's a problem there. But he clearly does not distinguish between fundamental water and water that's fundamental water and water that you experience. That's a major problem, all right? There ought to be a distinction. And because you don't distinguish that, you cannot make sense of water becoming fire. Anaximander says, okay, my teacher give the idea of monism, and monism is the right way to go. There is one thing down there. However, I'm not sure it is water, okay? So what Anaximander does, he goes deeper into the scenario. He looks at everything and says, hey, whatever that one thing is, okay, whatever it is, it's a pyrrhon. And what does that mean? Well, it's none of the above. It can't be none of the natural elements we experience. What it is, something that's boundless. There's got to be a lot of it to account for the substance of all the universe. And it's indeterminate, none of the above. It could be water or water-like, but it cannot be water. Okay, it can't be things that we experience on this level, because it has to account for all these different things. And water and fire are opposite in their nature. So therefore, it has to be something that's similar at the deepest level to them, and that's why they come from one source. He doesn't tell us what that source is, but he labeled it the apeiron. So the apeiron really is a fancy name for fundamental substance more clearly defined. More clearly defined. It's vague and obscure, but it's clearly defined. Anaximenes, his student, embraces the apeiron and understands it and goes a little further. He sets himself out to find out what that stuff was. See, water is a stuff. Even if Thales doesn't distinguish that being fundamental like Anaximander, it's still a stuff. We are stuff. We made it down way below as some kind of stuff, not nothingness, all right? Some kind of stuff. And Anaximenes realizes this, and he appreciates Thales' idea of water, and he sets himself out to find out what the apeiron would be like. Through his research and the study of the natural elements, he realized one of the natural elements can serve as the apeiron if you understand in the right way. And this was the air element, all right? What does that mean? He argued that air is made of parts. Very practical. If you're walking, all right, you know the air is around you. You understand that you're displacing the air today, all right? Somehow his imagination kicked in and said, hey, I'm displacing the air, so the air must be made of smaller parts. Then he began to imagine, suppose these parts got completely separated from one another. They can serve as the fundamental substance. The air that we breathe is a condensed version of the air particles. The foundation of his theory is established. He realized if these particles can serve the fundamental substance, they can replicate all the other substances that we observe. When the particles are together, we get this experience of stuff that we breathe. But if the particles were freely further squeezed together, they would begin to liquefy and become water. And they further begin to condense, they would eventually become solid and become earth. And then he writes, if these fundamental particles would begin to separate, we would observe that something that's going from earth to water to air, and eventually the air began to warm and warm and warm till you have fire. right? He embraced the idea of the apeiron given by Anaximander and explained how things come apart, okay? How things are on this level are experienced based on the positioning of the particles, air particles down there. Now, according to scientists today, Anaximenes got it right. Huh? Science today is right here. Anaximenes got it right. We call this the four states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. And if you didn't have air particles yet, atoms there, okay, he would have the modern theory. But the idea of atom did not emerge yet. So it's the air particles. This theory is controversial during that time because Thales and Anaximander embraced the idea of a monism, one thing. But air particles is not one thing. All right. Today we call this complex monism. Back then, it's a controversial theory. And so therefore a lot of people shunned it. Not that it it has a good theoretical explanation, but it violated the belief in monism that was going being embraced at the time. So they would call it complex monism. Why? And Anaximenes saw oneness. He saw one type of thing as opposed to a simple monism, just as one thing. He saw one type of thing. There might be infinite of them, but it's only one type of thing. They're exactly the same, right? In that sense, it is a type of monism. We call it complex monism. As opposed to simple monism, which is just one thing, right? So this controversy made this theory not as popular, although people love the theoretical richness, not as popular among some of the other critical thinkers, and so they explored other ideas.